again, everyone. You like the shirt? It's summertime, so I'm celebrating the Jaws movies. Okay, so today I'm doing a drum video, and I'll be playing on my Pearl Master Symphonic snare. And I'm using sticks that I would normally use on drum set. When I play rudimental or concert snare drum type things, I normally use Vic Firth SD1s, but my SD1s do not appear to be around here at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and use my drum set sticks, which are Vic Firth 5A with a nylon tip, which is terrible for things like this. But so real quick, I just want to cover the rudiments. And a lot of times, aspiring drummers will ask, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? You know, on the drum set. Well, a lot of it comes down to whether or not you can play certain types of rudiments. I'm just going to quickly go over one rudiment from each of the families. That is the single stroke rolls, multiple bounce roll, the double stroke roll, paradiddles, flams, and drags. So the single stroke roll rudiments tend to involve you just playing from hand to hand, just right to left, and the very basic one is called just the single stroke roll, where you're playing right, left, just over and over again. Real quick, the single stroke roll, and I'll play it open, closed, open. And I'm also using traditional grip for the purposes of this video and the height of the drum. When I'm playing drum set, I'll usually use match grip, but right now I'm using traditional. So, single stroke roll. So you notice there, I didn't try to pull a Buddy Rich and go extraordinarily fast with it. Now, speed is something you can work on with the single stroke roll, but I believe, most importantly with the single stroke roll, you're working on making your strokes even. And what I mean by that is having an even timing in between each stroke. Sometimes when you first start out doing this and you start speeding up, it ends up sounding like kind of a gallop, because if the hands aren't coordinated properly, instead of alternating, they end up hitting at the same time or getting close to it, and you end up sounding kind of like this. Like that. And so when you're working on this, you want to do it slow at first to make sure all the strokes are even, because if they're not, you're just kind of wasting your time at that point. Okay, so now moving on to the double stroke rolls, I'm going to do the long roll, what they call the long roll, sometimes now called the double stroke open roll. And it's a drum roll where you're letting the sticks bounce twice on each hand. Now to play this open, closed, open, you actually start without bouncing the sticks and just play right, right, left, left. And as you speed up, you have to transition into playing the roll bouncing your sticks. And it's this transition that is probably the most difficult thing about this rudiment, because you have to find the sweet spot where you're playing just right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left, and single stroking everything, and then transition into the bouncing, that sweet spot where you're kind of playing, where you can play both at the same speed. So anyway, I'll demonstrate that real quick. Now, this is the type of roll that's normally used a lot in marching band music. That's not to say that it's never used on drum set. In fact, it's used frequently on drum set, just in a lot of different ways, which I will sort of get into in another video. So for this rudiment, as I said, the transition is the most difficult part. And if you're having trouble figuring out how to get the sticks to bounce, I would recommend practicing this exercise where you're just letting the stick fall to the drum and bounce several times. Same with the left hand, which with whatever grip you're using. And it's this sensation of just letting the stick do the work, which is kind of at the heart of this rudiment, because if you try to force it in there, what ends up happening is the sticks bounce a little bit too fast and you get a little bit of a gap in between each stroke. I'm not just forcing it in there. Now, but if I let the sticks just fall and then bring it back up after 2 bounces, then I get a much more even sound. It's hard to get the feel. It takes a little bit of time, but it's hard to get the feel of just making everything one stroke, as you're playing this, because you're letting the sticks do the work and bounce every time. Sometimes players have a tendency with one hand or the other to not want to let the stick do the work, but that's the one thing you have to work on with that. So that's the double stroke roll. Okay, paradiddles. Now paradiddles are probably one of the most important things that you can learn for applying to the drum set. What I'm going to do right now is called the single paradiddle, and there's also a little bit of dynamics in it. A properly played single paradiddle has an accent at the beginning of each one. And the sticking for this rudiment is right, left, right, right, and then the left one is left, right, left, left. And at the beginning of each one, there's an accent. So the best way to work on this is to play that accent pretty hard and then play the other notes more softly. Intentionally try to play them softly as if you're playing a ghost note on the drum set. So single paradiddle. Now, the thing that's difficult about doing it this way is that beginners oftentimes will have the tendency to do this and immediately bring the left stick up after having played the accent, or vice versa, bringing the left stick up after having played the left accent. So this is kind of an exercise in controlling both of your hands doing different dynamics at the same time, which is something another thing I'm going to talk about in another video. So if you can't do this and leave that stick down there, then that's one thing you have to work on, because the stroke after the accent just needs to be a little. That's all you need. See, that's all you need. And then moving right along, similarly, talking about doing dynamics differently in both hands is the flam rudiment. So I'm just going to demonstrate the flam. Open, closed, open. Okay, so obviously a flam is a gesture where both sticks are involved. One stick is very low to the drum, the other stick begins higher. And the little one is called the grace note, and the high one is called the main note. And normally what I do is I try to behave like I'm going to bring them down at the same time, but because this one's closer to the drum, it's going to hit first. So you want to be careful not to intentionally play this one first, or the flame will sound too open. That is incorrect in my opinion. You want them to sound a little bit more crisp. And then if you're alternating flams, what you have to do is work on your downstrokes and your upstrokes, because once you play the right flam, you immediately have to prepare your sticks to play the left flam. So what happens is your right stick comes down and stays down, and the left flam, or the left stick, after having played the grace note, comes up. So two things you'd want to work on for that would be just doing a downstroke and leaving the stick down there like this, and then after the soft stroke, bring it up. And this is, again, another exercise that they frequently use in marching band. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why would I need that for the drum set? Well, you may not need that specifically for the drum set. I know a lot of times when flams are played on the drum set, they're kind of just, you know, whatever. You almost hit them both at the same time. But what the flam teaches your hands to do is to play two different dynamic levels at the same time with both, at the same time with both hands, because it's difficult to control each hand individually with two different dynamics. So, and that's something that's very important for playing with finesse and more dynamics on the drum set. So, if you want to get better at playing more dynamically with more finesse on the drum set, I would highly recommend working on flam rudiments, specifically the flam, and working on it in a sort of a very rigid manner. And the other thing before I move on is you'll notice that as you speed up, because you're going so fast, it's difficult to keep the grace note down, or at least to have it look like it's down. So tell anymore which one is which. So if you're really trying to work on it for the purposes of drum set, you don't need to go that fast. Okay, so the drag rudiments. So a drag is a situation where you're playing basically two grace notes before a main note, but the two grace notes are bounced. This is not like, I oftentimes run into this. There's a diddle and there's a flam. A diddle is a double bounce. Like the paradiddle. So when you do a drag, the two grace notes are not a part of a count of anything. They're basically grace notes, and they need to be played a little bit more crisply than a diddle next to the main note. So real quick, I'll just demonstrate it at a regular speed. Notice I'm not going. Those would be diddles, because it could also be written on the page as this. And it's the same rhythm. It sounds a little bit different because the sticking is different, but it's essentially the same rhythm. So if you see drags, you want to play drags. Now to play this one open, closed, open, just like the double stroke roll, you don't want to start the drag bouncing. You want to just play and sometimes to help with that, the way I was taught was to have it go along with the saying, and the saying was go to bed. Now, when you say the phrase go to bed, you don't say it go to bed. When you're saying it to somebody, you don't say go to bed. You say go to bed. And so that's the way you want it to sound when you start it off. And then as you progressively speed up, the grace notes begin to bounce a little. And so that's the best saying I can come up with. If you can come up with something else that yields the same results, then so be it. Doesn't really matter. Okay, the one last thing I didn't cover before, the multiple bounce rule. Now, the multiple bounce rule I see is oftentimes used in concert band music, and on the drum set, I see it used more often in jazz music. That's not to say that it can't be used in any genre, but usually in jazz music. Now, the difference between the double stroke roll and the multiple bounce roll, with the multiple bounce roll, we're letting the stick bounce multiple times, and each stroke is kind of like a buzz. Now, there are so many techniques to playing the multiple bounce roll. It's really impossible to say which one is exactly right. In my opinion, the best technique for playing a single stroke roll is to do whatever you have to do to make it sound smooth. And what I do is, rather than pressing all the way into the drum, I find a kind of a sweet spot where I press it in, but then I'm lifting out of it. Because when you play a multiple bounce roll, you don't want it to have a pulsy sound like this. You can hear each and individual stroke. The idea of the multiple bounce roll, the original idea anyway, was to try to sustain the sound of the drum. And in order to do that, you want to make it sound smooth. So, well, I won't play the multiple bounce roll open, closed, open. What I'm going to play is start very soft and crescendo, and then decrescendo again. Admittedly, that's not easy to do with sticks like this. It would be a lot better with my SD1s, but that's no excuse. My multiple bounce roll is not perfect. I know some very talented players who have a better roll than I do, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So you want it to try to sound smooth, and some people I've seen, when they try to play the multiple bounce roll, they can't get it very loud. To play it loud and smooth at the same time sometimes takes quite a bit of stamina and muscle to keep it going. As you can see, my arm is moving just a little bit. I've got a little bit of, maybe just a little bit of chicken wing going on, but not a whole lot. And then, again, most of the time I would do this with match grip, and the drum's a little high right now, but I'll try to do it match grip. See, that feels a little bit better. When I do concert band things, I tend to use match grip. When I'm playing rudimentally, I'll tend to use traditional grip. So that's kind of how that goes. Anyway, so that's what I wanted to cover today in my rudiment video. I've got a couple ideas, as I said, for a couple of other drum videos that I'll probably work on in the near future. So until then, take care, guys.